cows, and they're like me. I like cows. Just wait and see. But they go, move. Hey, move over. Well, I like cows. I like to watch them eat. I like cows. They don't move when they eat. I'm a lone cow hand. From Rio Grande. They got skinny feet, and like their friends, the shaved sheep. They got skinny feet.
What a short song. Hello, Internet. My name is John Kulas, 20-year professor of industrial organizational psychology, 10-year user of R for the normal, what most people think of as the intended application of R as statistical platform. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I've also been using R to wrap analyses and projects in terms of the documentation. So using workflows that are consistent with these reproducible research standards, the entire project is executed there, all within the same platform. So every week I hang out, and sometimes I'm a company that reminds me, since we kind of have a cattle theme going here. Let's get my cow friends in here. Um, so every week I hang out, and occasionally I'm joined by some compadres and compatriots and co-authors and collaborators on projects where we're doing this, where we're wrapping the entire project, regardless of what it is. We're executing it fully within R. And so we're here as an interactive resource. If there's anyone that's interested in doing this and maybe just don't know where to start, or you're doing it and maybe just want someone to bounce some ideas off of. So we just hang out. And um, what we've been doing is we've been exploring different features of these authoring platforms each week. Um, and so that's been a lot of fun. I've been learning a ton just kind of going through this process. Hopefully, other people out there have gotten something of value of it as well. But because we explore these features in a rather exploratory manner, each week we'll also go over and present a little easier to digest format. I think we'll go over what happened last week, and last week was the culmination of 5 weeks of exploration into typist, this newish document format. And well, we'll get into it. I had a bunch of revelations in this off week. Just of all the I, of all the tasks that a professor does, the least fun is probably making a syllabus. I don't know why it only hit me this week, but why, of all the things to try to replicate, like why did I choose? It was just self torture. And it turned out we learned a lot. I learned a lot, but but I really wish I would have chosen a different document type. It's just the tedium of making a syllabus. And there's a lot of fun with being a professor, but making a syllabus is definitely the bottom of the list. Bottom five. Maybe only student complaints, dealing with those, or hearing about those from others. That's worse than dealing with them. Um, so anyway, syllabus. There we go. So we're going to recap what happened the last 5 weeks, I guess. We'll primarily focus on last week and what we found last week, and a little bit of what I did offline. But we'll finally put that puppy to bed, so that's going to be awesome. I'm happy about that. And my cow friends here, even though they're anxious because they're about to be abducted, I'm sure they're also happy for me. And then we'll get into branding. This This was kind of fun thinking about something that's not a syllabus to take a look at. And this is a feature that I think is, again, new and emerging. And so we'll see how I handle that. There was a lot of frustration with typist just because of some of the new and emerging capabilities of it. We will see if this branding feature, and there, there's a hyperlink to the slides, and there's information hyperlinked in the slides. And one of the things that's hyperlinked here, I'm not going to access it yet because we'll get to it eventually. But there's a link to the Posit help page for what they intend to be helpful in terms of having a consistent branding theme across different product types. So if you want to do a dashboard or a website or a book or just an HTML page or a PDF document, there's a shared resource that should be accessible across those different rendered document types. I haven't, other than just kind of scrolling through the help page, I haven't tried this yet. So we'll collectively try it together and see how that works. But before we do that, let's see what happened last week, if I can find my segue here.
Well, they made it. Our heroes have finally found Mount Flatten, the floating mountain where Bullwinkle's Upsidasium mine is located. But it isn't clear sailing yet, for they have been accompanied by two grizzled old prospectors, Mojave Max and Death Valley Dottie, who strangely resemble those two arch-villains, Boris and Natasha.
Hey, loudmouth! Not so loud!
Last time, as a matter of fact, Boris began to push a huge boulder over on the unsuspecting Rocky.
Boris, do you think this is fair?
Of course not, Natasha. Why else would I do it?
Little did Boris know that the enormous stone was chock full of Upsidasium, the fabulous metal that defies gravity. So when it was rolled over the ledge, instead of landing on Rocky...
Boris is falling up!
You can't trust anybody anymore.
Yes, that huge stone fell upward until it was lost from sight.
Oh, kind of ended abruptly there. I wasn't expecting that. So, Upsidasium, yeah. I'm happy that they're no longer dealing with Captain Peach Fuzz, I think his name is, but the little bit that I cut out there, I think they mentioned his name, so he might be coming back. So, anyway, we'll deal with that when we deal with it. So, what we ended up with, and I'm going to walk through some of these elements here. Let me first, I guess, pull up the PDF that was generated through the traditional LaTeX-enabled kind of Quarto supported PDF generator. And this is the file that we're trying to replicate. This is an actual live syllabus that I used in a class. There's callouts in it, there's tables, there's hyperlinks, there's emojis, and we kind of hit these all one by one over the course of the last 5 weeks. Last week, one of the things we dealt with were emojis in tables, and that's generally speaking something we got to mess with now with Quarto 1.7 and with the Tiny Tables package together. It was a breeze. I did not anticipate that going as well as it did. The specialized targeted formatting was also a breeze within Quarto 1.7. I didn't do this online either, but there are some kind of false headers in this table that break up this book that this textbook had kind of sections to it, or tiers. And so because this schedule is dependent on, it's basically reflecting the content of the textbook. So put those sections in as well. And we'll see the tiny table specification for that it couldn't be easier. It worked out great. It was fantastic. The table widths, we were kind of sticklers with all of this. So this does not span the entire width of the printed page. This one does. So we did that in the specifications. Visual cues on hyperlinks, we added those last week as well. And those are kind of the big things. And then the other thing that I did offline was there's a lot of content here that was just not special. just headings and maybe bullets, a little markdown in terms of bolding and italicizing. So that kind of stuff I also filled in over the course of the last, over the course of, between last week's live stream and this week's. So let's go ahead and take a look at the comparison file. So now this is the typist generated syllabus. And some of it I was kind of a stickler with, and some of it, again, I had a revelation midweek, and I'm like, what, why am I doing this to myself with a syllabus? Like, I don't like syllabuses, syllabi. It's not something I generally like playing with. And I was focused the last few weeks. I was focused not on the syllabus itself, but just the task of learning typist and trying to replicate what we had. So for whatever reason, it hadn't really struck me other than this week when I started porting. And it was the least labor intensive part. I was literally copying and pasting content over from the previous specification to the new one. And that got me for whatever reason. So you see a little difference here in terms of the spacing within the tables. That's not something that we spent time on or ended up playing with. The font and the, what do you call it? The rolling over into a new line. Wrapping, sorry. The font and the wrapping, it's not something I attended to or cared about either. So the formatting aspects that we did care about were the relative column allocation that we gave to the left-hand bit and the right-hand bit. So this is a 2575 specification. Things like the dashes, the M dashes, the actual content we were paying attention to. I think I have this noted in, I don't know why that's letting me, okay, interesting. I do have a note in the script, and we'll come back to that, about the rendering of my email in the new version versus the hyperlink that's available in the PDF version. There is one little difference that typist by default has that I probably should have looked into but didn't, and that is this lack of space between a heading and the content. And so generally speaking, there's an easy way to get around that. I thought about it and then forgot about it, so it's not something I looked into. So that's a difference, but it's a difference I don't really mind. And stylistically, I think this right hand, which is the new one, looks pretty good. We saw this hyperlinked icon was actually facilitated originally through the Font Awesome package. There's just a little color that I put on that, but that's straight from Font Awesome. That was not rendering within the typist document, so what we did instead was we found an image and we just made it small and then hyperlinked that image. And so it has the same kind of operation. You can see again the slightly different specifications of the callout blocks. The big thing I guess that I notice here is, well, in the newer one, the color is a little deeper, a little more saturated. The icon, which is just an exclamation point here, is less prominent. And then again, we're missing that left hand kind of accent mark that we get in the standard PDF, and you get that in the standard HTML file as well. The hyperlink colors, that was something we added last week. It was fairly straightforward. This original one, one of the things we didn't fully replicate was column content. So instead of having content in the column in the new one, we just added that as a footnote, and I think that works fine. Because again, the way to get the content in the margins, that is a little beyond, I think, what the intent here was in terms of replicating. So we would be spending a long time on that. And we'd have to move beyond Quarto, I think. So we'd have to get at the actual underlying typist specifications or create a template. Anyway, it would have been a lot. We can come back to it eventually if someone out there's interested. Um, but I think I'm ready to move on from typist for the most part. This kind of stuff, when I said that I was copying and pasting, this is the kind of stuff that I was copying and pasting. So it's just, blah, 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 professor speak kind of stuff. So I just ported that over. It was a simple copy and paste. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the text blocks. You can see the spacing between the different level headings is actually, when they're back to back, it looks fine. It replicates. But again, below this, I think that's a second level heading there. Between the second level heading and the text, we're getting no space. Now, one of the ways we could, I guess I'm just speculating here, but I wonder if a citation style file, probably not. That generally is only going to impact references, not format of things like headings. So anyway, that probably isn't going to help. The other thing that I guess I did not attend to that I could have were things like hard page breaks. I just let all the content kind of flow into whatever page it wanted to go into, and so there's slight differences there with that. Both these documents ended up being 8 pages, so it's not that big of a difference. Ultimately, the cumulative effect isn't that large, I guess. So let's get down to the tables. The tables, I think, are the interesting parts. Here's a table. You can see that I probably should have specified some hard page breaks because this table is being cut off. It renders great, so it carries the heading. I left it partially because it's interesting without any sort of direction from us. It does repeat the header on the second page, which is nice. That's what I would have wanted to see. Our monkeys, look a little bit different. And I did recently render this PDF, so that I'm not sure what's happening there. Our speculation last week was that with different browsers, maybe the icons, the emojis are rendering differently. It doesn't seem to be it. There seems to be different sources these emojis are being pulled from. Okay, so here's an interesting table because first of all, I found an error. In the original class syllabus, I didn't rename my column. So in R, if you have column headings that have characters that shouldn't be there, like a space, R will automatically replace that with a period. And so K.S. readings, I would have preferred to be rendered like K ampersand S readings. So I changed that. But honestly, that's maybe one of the only content specific changes, the actual stuff that's in it that's changed. Now this we actually read this table in as a CSV, a comma separated file. You can look at the note on the bottom. You can see that the note is rendered a little bit differently. I think I did try to specify italics for the note. And then also there's this line break that I don't like on the original syllabus, and by default it didn't render with the line break in the tiny tables typist specification, so I like that. I just left it. These section breaks I thought came through really nice. Again, the unfortunate instructor choice in terms of colors there, pink and blue, is not something that this course instructor should have done, but we just replicated it. And then this table used the same specifications that we used in the larger table, but there was a real oddity that happened here. So I did this offline. We did this table last week live, but I focused on just the background and font of this row here, whatever row that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Row number 8, it looks like. Now these, we'll get into the script in a second, so you can see why I call it 8, even though it's actually rendered as row 10. This table was requested first, and there's some bleed through with some of the formatting. Now, the bleed through on the formatting is doing odd things to indentation, and it's also doing an odd thing to the font specification of one of my rows. Now, I did not ask for this. This light blue font that you're seeing on the April 10th row, but because I had this previous tiny table specification with that light blue font on the 10th row, it's rendering weird. And I actually tried a few different things to see what's going on there. And when we take a look at the script, I'll walk you through that. The rest of this, I think, is just, again, kind of, this is probably where I got sick, and I'm like, not sick, but this is probably where I said, why did I do this? This is a silly thing to do. Yeah, there we go. This is actually a little different here because, rightly so, I had some of my students call me out at the end of class and say, hey, you never told us how many pages you want on this, and that's... Students always want to know that. I would rather not tell them my expectation, but of course they want it because there's a rubric that goes with it and grades are tied to it, and ultimately those are so important. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, it worked out great. I'm so happy we did it. Actually, now that I'm on the back end of it, I'm very glad that we did it. The scripting for it, there were a couple of things that I did want to point out here. And so we'll just kind of go slowly. The cue of the visual cue for the hyperlinks, that was actually a fairly easy specification, and so that was just an include in header specification. Now, I think what we did last week was I initially tried to put this in the wrong spot in the YAML. So this front matter is kind of meta formatting instructions for the entire document. And up here on line 5, we say the type of document that we want to create. I thought we could maybe put this include in header outside of that typist specification, but no, it wants it in it. It's fine as long as we do that and follow this kind of format of the specification of the alteration that we want to do itself. It works just fine. You can change to whatever color you want. Currently it's in red, green, blue specification. That's not something I typically do. I usually use hex codes. Hex codes work as well. We'd have to change RGB to hex, and then pound sign, and then the number itself, or the character string itself should work. Hex, I don't know if I've spoken about it much, but hex code stands for hexadecimal, and hexadecimal is characters, the numbers 0 through 9, and then the letters A through F. So it's 16 total characters. And so that's what we refer to when we say hex code. The site proc true, I guess I left that highlighted here just to, again, kind of emphasize that includes in header needs to go before that, but this also is important for telling typists that we actually want Quarto processing of the citations, and that will make lines 7 and 8 here, possibly 6, but I think just 7 and 8. It makes lines 7 and 8 actually do something. So if we don't say, yes, I want Quarto to process citations, then this information is kind of not going to be useful or not helpful. Tiny table, I think I left that highlighted because we decided that of the candidate packages that we could use to render tables, Tiny Table was the one that was most efficient. And so it doesn't mean it's best, I guess, but it I I now kind of like it. I think it's something that I'm probably going to look into a little more and maybe use a little more. Now, the rendering in the typist syllabus looking a little different than the original syllabus for the email specification was a weird code. It was a weird error that we were getting thrown, and that was the domain part of this email address. And so it doesn't matter if it says ergreports.com or google.com or yahoo.com or whatever. The typist did not like. Well, you can't see the cool bus, can you? Let me get our UFOs out of there for a little bit so you can see the cool bus. Um, I like that GIF because instead of just getting rid of school, they just called it cool, which I thought it is a cool bus, drag racing bus. So anyway, this seems to be something that is specific to the typist document type, not something we anticipated. Um, but the workaround, the first workaround that I tried was just to enclose it in ticks, and that worked. So I didn't come back to it and try to tweak it any further or do any other specifications. Here on line 42, this is the hyperlinked PDF icon, and if we were to try to follow this out, it's a little too long. The wrapping, one of these weeks I might spend some time on wrapping the code blocks as well, because there's a couple of workarounds that I've found and used, but they don't always work. And so it would be nice to have this text wrap a little easier. But so on line 42, we have a second level header that says supplementary material. And then the normal our markdown specification for an image is right here. So the exclamation point square brackets, HTTPS upload. I guess I took it from Wikipedia. So this entire bit right here is just accessing that picture. I'll show you here. So if I copy that, I missed the H, but I guess we can put it back in. Boy, it really doesn't. It really wants you to have that H, doesn't it? So the URL itself is pulling up this image, and we didn't spend a lot of time. It's just an image that we found. It's a PNG, which I think means that this little bit around the edges maybe is transparent, but it doesn't really matter because in our typist document itself, there's a white background anyway, so it acts as though it's transparent. Um, and then in terms of modifying that, we just used this width specification. The height transfers with it. So the default unit that's used here is just pixels. And so we played with that just a little bit. And then this is a hyperlink to the actual supplementary text that's available for free if the students were to choose that they wanted to actually, sorry, I should have disabled my mouse wheel. If the students decided that they actually liked content enough where they wanted to access the supplementary text. I'm guessing nobody did, but who knows? Okay, so let's see what else we have highlighted here to call out. The last week, so my editor, the editor that I was using, I use RStudio as my preferred IDE, and to get these emojis in, we kind of cheated a little bit. We went into the visual editor and inserted special characters, and then went back to the source code because I'm more comfortable in that environment. But it seemed to something was acting funny. And so the editor here, I say there were oddities to it. One of the things that we could have tried is we could have tried to just copy these emojis from a different source. And again, they may have rendered a little differently. So there's all kinds of online places to get emojis. We could have just copied them from those instead of trying to go back and forth between visual and source editor. And if I were to do it again, I probably would try. It would be my first workaround to see if those oddities that we were getting in the editor could maybe be isolated to us going back and forth between visual and source. My assumption is that the good people at Posit they aren't intending people to interact with their IDE that way. So again, maybe a hackish way to kind of get these emojis into a document when and where we want to. The grouping, as I mentioned, those sections of the textbook, I didn't do that on screen. I did that offline, but the actual specifications were really straightforward, really efficient, really easy. You can see here there's just a little bit of markdown that I used. So those asterisks around principles, applications, and issues, those are giving me in the table. Those are giving me these bolded specifications, and so it literally was just an additional pipe. Now you can see here, last week I was using the native pipe operator, and I was using the native pipe operator one because that's Tiny Tables uses that specification, and I guess that's the main reason I was using it. But we had an issue, so there was an issue in rendering this document, and that issue was in this second table that we asked to be rendered in a separate chunk below the previous chunk. And some of the formatting specifications that we had asked for up here, so in chunk one, it's not chunk one of the document, but chunk one that we're focused on. So some of the formatting specifications that we asked for here in chunk one were actually bleeding through into a separate chunk with a separate tag on it with a separate label. So class sched, lab sched, really creative, huh? Different objects named, but the actual rendering of the tables, the second table was having some bleed through for the first specification. And again, I think what I'll do, maybe because I think this is important to take a look at, I think we might actually, I might go into that project file and render it and show people what happened. And really what I'm focused on is this indentation here, occasional indentation. There's three of them. Coincidentally, I have three groups up here: issues, applications, and principles. And then I have one font specification in this previous table, and that font specification is also coming through in the second table. So let's do a quick, before we get into branding, because branding will be fun, I think. But before we get into it, let's take a quick look at that typist syllabus one last time. Last time we get to see the typist syllabus. I'm excited about that. I think I'll be going back to my comfy PDF. Now you can see it's on the line that I was working on, and this line is that second, it's the first table actually. And so I put an eval statement in this chunk just to try to kind of turn it off, turn it on, and see if that had an effect, and it does. And again, I tried different piping operators. I tried taking off the piping operator entirely and just, oh, what's going on here? Looks like it doesn't like my hyperlink. That's weird. But I tell you, I've been having more issues over the course of the last, see if I just put a different URL in here. I've been having more issues over the last month, maybe? I don't know. Part of me wonders, I love Posit, I love their products, I love Quarto, but part of me, crying out loud. happy it rendered, but I'm a little upset that it rendered. Part of me wonders if there's too many features now. They're just supporting too many things. And it's probably user error, but it seems like there's a little less reliable performance that might be happening. Okay, so here's the issue. So there's no request for special indentations on the dates here. There's no request for a weird font here. So if I turn off, my confidence level with reproducing things has kind of sunk through down to the floor. So if I turn off this first chunk, and this is the one that first says, give me some groups and give me a weird background on the table. Now I'm not going to get any table specified now, or I shouldn't. Now this could also throw a little bit of an error. Sometimes it's just renders as question marks if it's called out, for example, in something like a cross-reference later in the one thing we didn't check is if we have our table of contents. Yeah, we do. Well, that's not coming through exactly like what we'd want either. But here you see the table as we want it to be rendered. And the table as we want it to be rendered is getting thrown off by including this table in it. And again, this table, now one thing I didn't do is I didn't try switching the ordering. So I think I'll just switch we're not supposed to be doing this tonight. We're not supposed to be rehashing the syllabus because the syllabus is done. The syllabus is perfect. The syllabus is complete. The syllabus is great. But the syllabus does have this weird bleed through. And so I do need to at least, I guess, acknowledge it. I'm guessing it feels like it's a tiny tables issue. But I don't know that for sure. I'm going to take this previous chunk and I'm going to throw it in below. And we'll see if there's bleed through now on the second table from the first. There shouldn't be any bleed through for anything, but yeah, so we're getting the same thing. So we're getting some weirdness. I wonder if it's a stacking. Let me try one. Sorry, people. Let me try one more thing just before we close this out. And the only other thing I'm thinking, it's weird. I don't know why it would be, but because they're back to back, maybe with not really much content in between. So let's move the class schedule. So again, so the fact that the sequencing can be reversed, it's, I guess, telling me that there probably isn't an object named in one of the chunks that's being recognized in another one. It feels more like it's oddities from the package itself, or maybe the package in terms of how. Yeah, it's got to be it almost has to be the package. So yeah, we're getting the same font is coming through on a line, and the indents are coming through on a line. Now, one of the things, so the tiny tables package, love it, but new to it, and one of the things I guess we don't know is, let me put this back where it was, just so if I come back to this in like 2 years, I don't, it'll make more sense where it is. One of the, sorry, I'm trying to talk and not make mistakes at the same time. One of the things, in a couple of years when I come back into this, I would want it to be fully replicating that PDF that we were originally trying to do, with the exception being those bleed throughs. Okay, so all in all, I'm quite happy with the syllabus that we created. If you go back and look at the first time, the first session that we had, I think it was a complete fail. I think that was the session. It was just me kind of feeling through typist and it not doing anything that I wanted it to do. And so the fact that we actually, it's 5 weeks, but in terms of actual coding time, processing time, it's probably a couple hours, 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. Um, so the fact that we ended up with an entire syllabus after 2 or 3 hours of work, I'm actually happy with that. And the rendered product looks great. In terms, I guess I didn't. It's about two. Sorry, people. It's about 260 lines of code in the typist script. My expectation is it's going to be about the same. 280 in the original PDF. Now, I didn't have tiny tables in the original PDF, so I'm guessing that's my little guy's getting in the way there. I'm guessing that most of that difference is probably the tiny table specification that we found, which again, one of the reasons we like it is it seems to be an efficient specification of tables. So, okay. Yay! So syllabus done. Tiny tables people, if you're watching and have any insight as to why those are bleeding through, I would love to hear it. Guess what I was about to say, and I kind of cut myself off. Not being familiar with that package, maybe it's not intended to have multiple tables within the same document. Maybe it's just kind of a one and done thing. It could be, maybe. I don't know. It seems odd, but I guess it could be. So tonight, how much time do we have left here? I guess I wasn't too verbose. I knew this was going to be a long let's rehash thing because we spent so much time on the syllabus. But tonight, I thought it would be fun to take a look at some of the branding capabilities. And it sounds like Quarto has been supporting an actual extension. And I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that this extension is now built into the rollout of Quarto 1.7.3, which is what I have on my local computer. That's the solution that we found to getting color emojis within our typist document. I don't know if the brand extension was in previous versions of Quarto. This is not something that I was really familiar with prior to stumbling across it just this last week, as I was trying to think of something that we could take a look at. And so the purpose of this is, as I see it, is to have consistent application of brand specification, things like colors, fonts, so on, logos, things like that. So consistent specification of those types of styling considerations across different document types. Now, one of the things that made my heart stop a little bit after just going through typist is this acknowledgement that it's a kind of a active area of work. And so just the fact that we're likely going to run into more obstacles that usually meeting obstacles and running errors and throwing codes, there's no anxiety with it. It's part of the process and you learn from it. But when you're dealing with applications that are in, let's just call it beta, maybe that's not entirely appropriate, but man, there's some anxiety with that. So it looks like we should be okay with HTML files, dashboards, slides, and typist as well. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to leave this open and close out. Bye-bye syllabus. I won't miss you. I'll close out my other files and let's start a new project in our studio here. I'm gonna probably put that in a new directory and I'll probably forget where it is because this is not how I usually work. I don't want to put it where I normally put stuff. Now I have kind of gotten used to I would not typically put stuff here, but over the course of the last few weeks we have put stuff on this desktop, and now I'm kind of it's a go-to. If I lose something, it's oh yeah, let's check that out. So I think we'll actually go in here. I think, did we say create a new one? We'll open desktop. There we go. Then we'll call this branding. Why not? And I think we'll create a couple of different files. So let's do a reveal document or a reveal slide. We'll call it our presentation. And the author is a bunch of cows. And we'll render that so it'll force us to save it. So I'm going to call it presentation as well. So presentation in our project directory. There's my QMD. I should get a HTML popping up here soon as that renders. There's my HTML file. Now let's also create, what else did it support? Let's see. HTML dashboard. Let's leave dashboard for the last thing. Let me take a look at. We could try a typist document. Why not? We just can't get away from typist. So let's try a typist document. Again, I don't think it's going to be an option here in the actual wizard. So we'll just take care of that here. And if we call this one presentation, oh, we got to give it an author as well. Another bunch of cows. So here we have our untitled typist masterpiece. Moosterpiece, I guess it should be, if we're talking about cows. And let's try to render that. And again, I'm giving these horrible names, but I guess let's just call it Moosterpiece. And the cow thing tonight, I had a hard time finding a title slide for this week. I don't know why, but branding, I got in my head cattle. And so I'm like, well, it should be cattle oriented. And I found that kind of cool looking cow, and he seemed to work, he or she. I don't know, he's got horns. Does that mean he's a he? I don't know anything about cows. So I thought that would work. And then one of my favorite bands here locally, they still kind of play, but they're, it's like everything from the 80s, 90s. They got two people left originally, and then a bunch of people who are just making money from the name. But they had a song that I like called Cows, and so that's what I played early on, and so that's why we have a cow theme. And probably will next week too, because I don't think we're going to get very far this week. So we have two things going on now. We got a typist document, that's our Moosterpiece PDF, and then we have a presentation, which sounds kind of boring after having a Moosterpiece. But let's see if we can get, and again, what they look like is white backgrounds, the font you see. And I should have enabled mouse wheel on this. Again, it kind of bites me in the butt a little bit on the slides that I share with people, but it just makes navigating so much easier than not like going to the keyboard is that big of a deal, but now I can just kind of mouse wheel through it. And so what I did there was I did a hard return after format, and then an indent on reveal.js, and then another indent to start to kind of customize what my slides look like. Now, according to the help file, I should be able to in this project directory, I should be able to just throw in a file called underscore brand.yaml. So let's do that. Let's just copy what they have. That's a hex code, should be okay. I think the reason, so they're doing some things here. They're actually naming dark gray, they're giving it this value, and then they're calling it up later. So they're doing more than that they need to do here. Logo, we're gonna have to find a logo and put it in our directory. And it looks like what their brand looks like is this kind of blue with, it's a really weird font. So let's try it. I'm just going to copy straight from the hyperlink page here, and I'm going to create a new file. I don't know if you can do a YAML file straight from here. So let's do a text file. I'm going to paste in the information that was in that YAML, and we're going to call it, see if it'll let us save it as. And I think the underscore notation that they're actually using, it's funny, I started doing that years ago too. In my folder organization scheme, if I wanted something to be higher so it's noticeable, I did the underscore. I don't know if that's why they do that. But that's why I did it. So I'm going to save it as, and it doesn't seem to want to let me pay. There we go. See if it comes through here. Well, it looks like it's reading it as a YAML because things are, oh yeah, comes in. I have a little YAML icon, and then my colors look great. And I'm kind of half expecting this not to work because again, ooh, look at that. What? That was easy, Posit. You make it too easy. All too easy. You know what we didn't do? We got to put a logo in here, right? It's funny, it didn't give us any error, although I didn't look carefully here in our background jobs. Oh, yeah, didn't find our logo. That's because we didn't tell you what it was. Let's get before we do our typist, let's get a cow in here. What's a famous cow? Elsie? You know, Goofy had a girlfriend. I think she was a cow. What the heck was her name? Does anyone know Goofy's? I'm gonna get the internet police coming after me here. Zenobia? No, that's Clarabelle. Yes, Clarabelle. We'll use Clarabelle. If I can find where I put this stuff. Goofy's kind of, the thing I appreciate most about Goofy is his yell. You know, he's got a yell, like Goofy has his own yell. Let me find this, and then I'll talk a little better. We'll save it as logo because I believe that's what it's looking for. Yeah, Goofy has his own yell here. Let me see. I don't know if the sound will come through. And I think ski jumping is the first time we heard it. Yeah, Goofy scream. Oh, it's going to take a while. Let me see if it... I don't know if you could hear that, but that was the Goofy yell. I don't want to repeat it because that would be annoying. Well, now, hey, it does show. I was going to say it doesn't show up, but there she is. She's in the lower right-hand corner. Can anyone see that? Now, with these Reveal.js slides, you can Alt and click, and it'll kind of bring you closer on things. Man, I mean, that could not work slicker. So let's check out our Mooster piece. I don't know where is she gonna show up in the Mooster piece. There's okay. That's really cool. Um, so I think we're gonna probably take a look at this for a couple of weeks, but let's play with this a little bit. It's pulling these fonts straight from Google. So let's see if we can get a different. I use Google fonts all the time. So we'll see if we can. I think they actually have a cow one. They have like although there's a family of fonts called a rubric or something like that. Rubik. There we go, Rubik. And now there's a Rubik. I think there we go. Moolah la. Oh my goodness. All right, we gotta try Moolah la. I don't think it's gonna work, but where it says family here. Now again, I'm not. So one of the things we're gonna have to do next couple of weeks is, and I'm looking to see if anything changed when we did that. Sometimes in the HTML files, they'll actually change as you're working with something. Look at that. Wow. Okay. So that worked really easily. And it's looking like a Mooster piece now. That's a terrible font, isn't it? But it's fun, so we're gonna keep it. But I wonder if we can do font size. We didn't do the presentation in Moolah yet. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so with the there's different CSS that's being applied to these different portions. And so with these goofy fonts, sometimes the combination of things like bolding, or so you can see the bold here is coming through weird. So this would be really, I don't know. This looks like a colorblind test or something right now. But let's see what else we can play with here. I wonder if we can do. I don't think we would do font size here, would we? We do logo, we do font, we do color. I guess we can also see the portions of the documents that we want to play with. Ooh, there's a light and dark. Different ways of specifying color. I know I'm not talking a lot, but I'm looking and trying to see what other elements we can affect. Here we go. Foreground, background, light danger stuff. Those are useful for conditional coding and display. Where I don't think we need to do any of that. We can have different size logos. That might be helpful, as a single logo might not work well in all locations. Yeah, that's a good point. You don't need all three. I wonder if we can find a few Clarabelles. We're running out of time here, aren't we? That might be next week for Clarabelle. We can have a path, so we didn't need to save it locally. Typography. So I think we can probably have one more week of this. Let's see if we can do our badass color. Again, I don't think we need this I don't think we need this palette statement. So let's try to play with this a little bit. So I'm going to change background should just be the value that I'm seeing up on line 3. Same thing with foreground. No, I may have misspecified those, but I believe the background and foreground are the primary specifications, so it should look the same, just a different way of specifying. Yeah, so I think what I did was I transposed those. So 2 goes down here. And def, there's all kinds of weird combinations of hex characters that can lead to weird looking specifications. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So that does the same thing. So you don't need the palette to be specified, but if you wanted to later call up, instead of dealing with hex codes, if you wanted to call up an actual semantic label, you could do that. Now primary, I believe, is the font color itself. So let's do hex codes. Hex code picker, I guess we can just do. I don't have one in mind, so what is this? Adobe used to have a kind of cool app where you could pick from. I don't know if they still do. I want to pick one that kind of stands out with our, what do we have, a bluish background? Should we do purple? Let's try purple. And I believe primary should be the font. So let's see if that works. And again, this is just, okay, so primary is only, it's working, but it's not working for everything. It looks like it got my hyperlink. You know, the moo la la is still coming through. Let's see what it looks like in the Mooster piece. Yeah, it's the hyperlink. Okay. So I think that just as like a quick and easy, hey, let's try this, was quick and easy. So I think next week we might spend a little more time on this and seeing how we might want to integrate this across different types and keep them all in the project directory. And maybe do like a mutual rendering instead of me going in and getting everything off at once. Maybe we could like ask for these files off of a dashboard or off of a website. I think that's what the posit example actually has, so we could try to replicate that. All right, cool. So if you stumble across this and have any questions or any sort of features you'd like to see, drop me a note. Otherwise, next week, I think we'll probably do a part 2 on this, just because, that's kind of neat. We'll play with this a little more. Maybe not with the cow theme. I don't know, we'll see. Goodbye.